Okay, welcome to Business Owners Speak. Today I am very excited to have with us Norman Weitzberg with Pinnacle Executive Search. Norman, how are you today?
Good, thank you, Matt.
Great, appreciate having you. Let's jump right in, and if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your business.
Okay. Uh, Pinnacle Executive Search was launched in September 2017. Many years ago, I also launched and worked as a sole entrepreneur with Norman Keith and Associates, Inc. That was a 25-year venture, profitable every year, successful every year. Same holds true for Pinnacle Executive Search for the last 5 or 6 years. And in between those two experiences, I've held other positions, including being a director of talent acquisition, director of business development, and client relations. So I've done other things other than executive search, but for the most part, emphatically, my career has been recruitment industry oriented, primarily as a sole entrepreneur with Norman Keith and Associates and Pinnacle Executive Search. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. Okay, so explain the difference. So Norman, I'm sorry, the name of that business, Norman Keith?
That was Norman Keith and Associates, Inc. from 1980 to 2005. 2005 to 2017, I held other titles with other companies. Again, as a director of business development and client relations, interestingly enough, for a $60 million emergency medical services and ambulance company. And I've been a director of talent acquisition for a financial services firm who's no longer is in business, by the way. So I've done other things, but again, for the most part, executive search and recruiting is my background.
Okay. So take us to 2017 and, what gave you, courage is one thing you could say, but go through the thought process of opening your own firm.
Well, I guess by nature, I have entrepreneurial spirit, and that, I'll call it a hot flash, came back to me. And I just decided to go back into the arena. Typically at Pinnacle Executive Search, I've been recruiting tax people for 1 or 2 clients who happen to be globally based public accounting firms. However, I've recruited a wide range of people, ranging anywhere from a neurosurgeon to an auditor, to a tax professional, to a management consultant, to a director of fundraising, and on and on and on. So I've done many different things within the recruiting industry, primarily in the Fortune 500 globally based CPA firm arena, acute care hospitals, managed care organizations, and not-for-profit fundraising firms. Those represent my client base. Different organizations have engaged my services, retaining me. I've also worked, of course, on a contingency basis at different points in my career.
Mm-hmm. I'm very curious to hear the interview process or just the process of placing a neurosurgeon.
Okay. I was retained many times by JFK Health Systems in Edison, New Jersey. And one of the things they were doing at that time in the 1980s when I worked with them, they were building a neuroscience center, and they needed a neurosurgeon to head up that program. They also needed an epileptologist. So I ended up recruiting candidates in the United States and Canada for those 2 positions at that time. Since we're talking about the medical industry, I also happen to have recruited neonatologists, OBGYN, family practice medicine, emergency medicine physicians. So that high-end physician arena is something I have a good deal of background working within as a recruiter.
Did you originally have a set couple of industries in mind that you would focus on, or is that just kind of how how it's worked out?
Well, I would say the latter. It's kind of how it worked out. What happens with me is I move around recruiting different types of people in different types of industries to create challenges for myself and stay interested. And because I do that, I'm learning as I go, which is of interest to me, as opposed to only eating chocolate ice cream 24/7, 365. So although I happen to be a fan of chocolate ice cream, I also like to eat steak and lobster. So I go from auditors to consultants to tax people to healthcare to not-for-profit. As I've already said, my client base is diverse: Fortune-rated companies, hospitals, not-for-profits, et cetera, and so on. So that keeps me interested, motivated, and engaged intellectually.
That's interesting because a lot of people, especially business owners, have a tendency to kind of fall back to their comfort zone, right? Be good. Just keep doing the same if it's working somewhat, instead of actually challenging yourself to think outside of what's comfortable. And that's really what ends up growing and scaling businesses, right? So have you always kind of had that thirst for more information and challenges?
Well, with regard to what I do and how I do it, yes. And I could have stayed only with one specialty, whether it's tax or audit or healthcare. But because I'm a one-man band, I always wanted to remain a one-person company because I didn't want the responsibility and obligation to teach people what I know and then watch them take what I teach them and go into business for themselves. I was always concerned that that could happen, which is a stress level that I did not want to experience.
Okay.
Also, the whole notion of managing people and paying them responsibly would take me away from personal production. And I was concerned that my own personal production would be cut in half or more if I started to hire people, even though one could make the case that I would be leveraging my experience and knowledge and diversifying it through the labor of others. I chose not to do that for the reasons stated.
Interesting. Okay, so you're the only employee.
And always have been.
And always will be.
Well, once I had an administrative assistant working with me, but she didn't last more than a couple of months. She quit and took another job. And I never hired another one. So I guess I'm the only employee. Yes.
So Norman, what happens when you get a couple new placements and you're the only one to do it? Do you have to kind of stagger them, or are you able to just kind of hit overtime and hit the gas and get everything done?
Hit the gas and get it done. I do it all. One of the benefits of working with me versus one of my competitors is that Norman is going to do the research, the candidate sourcing, the recruiting, the client development, the putting of the transactions or the relationships together between a candidate and a client, extending the offer, confirming the start date. If there's a reference check required, we do that. So I wear all of those hats from start to finish, which differentiates me and Pinnacle Executive Search from my competitors. There's value added in working with one person who's accountable to the client and the candidate every step of the way. And if I would point to a differentiator in working with Pinnacle, it is that you get me for the entire ride.
Okay. Start to finish. It's all Norman. All right. So walk us through just kind of the process, the nuts and bolts of bringing someone on. Are you doing this? You're doing the ads and the sourcing and the vetting of the resumes and the interviews?
All of it.
So you get it from point A to what does kind of the handoff look like?
There is a handoff. What do you mean by a handoff?
Well, I mean, are you doing the actual hiring, or do you get it down to a couple of candidates and present them to the client?
Anywhere between 1 and 3 or 5 candidates, whatever it may be. I present the candidates to the client. The client makes the hiring decision. I will certainly suggest reasons why they should select one candidate versus another. If we're in the position where we have more than one good candidate, which does happen, I'll consult with the client and advise them what to do and the reasons behind my thinking. But the ultimate decision is theirs. They're paying me for a service to advise them, find the candidate, put them in front of that person, and get that person hired. But the client makes that decision. Sometimes they prefer to extend the offer directly, which I have no problem with, as long as the client has spoken with me about what the offer will be, so that I can advise them whether I think a sign-on bonus would be appropriate, other incentive compensation, annual bonus, or otherwise should be included in the offer. But if they want to extend the offer, it's their nickel. If that's what they want to do, I'm on board with it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, you can only take it so far, right? If it's in the end, it's their choice.
And I say to a client, listen, Mr. Client, you're in the business of being a consumer goods company. With due respect, you don't do recruiting every day, just like I don't do consumer goods every day. It might make sense for you to leverage my 20 or 30 years experience in extending offers and helping candidates to make decisions. Allow me to make the offer and close the transaction for you. That's part of the reason why you pay me a fee. So, that type of a conversation may happen in certain situations, depending upon the relationship with the client and what's going on with the search and who the candidate is, all the variables.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense. And so you've been in business for about 6 years now. Obviously, you have a long career prior to this in similar industry. I'm
in business with Pinnacle Executive Search for 6 years.
Right.
Norman Keith and Associates for 25 years.
Right.
And other experiences along the way. With no desire to retire.
No desire to retire. None whatsoever.
None.
Okay. So what's then on that note, what's the future look like for Pinnacle?
I plan on doing what I'm doing. It works. I know how to go through the high and low periods of the job market, of the stock market. When things go low or high or whatever's going on, I make adjustments and I switch gears, recruiting in a different industry that might be recession-proof or not recession-proof, whatever it might be. So I don't have a desire to hire people. I work from a home office, and if it's a 40 to 60 hour week, whatever it takes, so be it. I get it done.
And just so we clarify, your services are available across the country, correct?
Yes, nationwide.
Nationwide.
I've also recruited candidates from Canada on rare occasion, but I have done that.
Okay. So Norman, as a business owner, what's something that has, and you may say nothing because of your experience, but surprised you as a business owner? What's something you didn't quite expect?
I'd have to think about that.
Yeah. You've seen it all.
I don't want to say that I've seen it all, but the people watching this video or listening to me speak, I'm hoping they get a sense that I understand what I'm doing, and I paid a lot of dues to get to this point, including having sleepless nights worrying about transactions closing.
Yeah.
It's a stressful job to create relationships with corporate America as well as candidates and put those transactions together so that they work. What am I surprised at? I just don't know the answer off the top of my head.
That's all right.
Sorry, I don't have an answer to that.
No, that's all right. So thinking for other people that are considering, maybe they've got some intellectual property built up in a certain industry and they're thinking about taking the leap and opening their own business or starting their own business, what's some advice you could give for people in that position?
I was thinking about that, uh, and I do have one piece of advice, which I did not do in my career, but I think it's a wise thing to do. And that is get a coach. Get someone who understands what that business owner or entrepreneur is doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and bring that coach in, even if it costs you money, as a sounding board and as a rudder to help you steer the ship. Because there are going to be waves that can be pretty tremendous while you're on the ocean. And if you have a coach who understands what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it, that coach, in my opinion, could be invaluable as a resource, especially when those waves on the ocean seem insurmountable.
Norman, I couldn't agree more, right? Especially when you're running a business on your own, it can be lonely. And how do we make decisions, and how do we hold ourselves accountable? And those are all hard.
Now I'm going to answer your other question that I didn't have an answer to before.
Yes, good.
Which was, what am I surprised at? I did not anticipate, with regard to the highs and the lows, how extreme they could be. The high of making a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 fee and then doing more than one of them can put you on cloud nine emotionally, psychologically, financially, and you could really get very excited about it. Especially in a case like mine, when you grew up making 15-cent tips,
right,
delivering pharmaceuticals to old ladies in the Bronx, which was my first job, working at a local drugstore. So when you don't forget where you come from, making 15-cent, 25-cent tips in the winter, walking 4 miles up a staircase or two to a little old lady who gives you a dime or 15 cents in the winter for delivering her medication, I don't forget that. So when I say I earn $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 fees, I don't have my nose in the wrong place. I remember where I come from.
Yeah.
Now the lows, when you lose a deal, or for 3 or 6 months, you have not made any revenue, and how that affects you psychologically, in my case, as a sole entrepreneur, and you have bills to pay, you can go in the tank mentally, which I've done, and you have to fight your way out of it. And if you're alone, particularly without a coach,
yeah,
that can be very discerning, very difficult. So that low-high cycle, to the degree of the extremities in both, that I was not prepared for and surprised me cognitively and emotionally throughout my career.
I think that's a really, really great point, and something that not a lot of people think of, especially on how to react to both the highs and the lows, right? You catch a high, you don't necessarily go buy a big boat. You just keep driving the thing forward as best you can. So that's
now the question, your follow-up question, if I may.
Yeah.
Norman, how do you handle the highs and the lows?
Yeah.
How do you handle them? Well, you got to go to the gym and pump some iron and ride the bike to get some of the stress out. It helps to have a partner in life who earns a salary, which my wife does. When you're down and you're not earning money for a certain period of time, you need to stay focused and rely on your work ethic to get you out of the hole that you perceive yourself to be in. That's my advice, how to handle the lows. The gym, weights, the bike, having a partner. And in my case, it happens to be a wife who earns a salary to get you through paying the bills, staying afloat. You can also go to the bank and get a loan. so that you have capital available if you need capital. On the other side of the fence, how do you handle the highs? Don't buy your own act. Don't buy your own act. Go back to work. Don't stay up here on the high and overly celebrate. I didn't say not to celebrate, but overly celebrating success, taking away from your work ethic or paying attention to what you have to do to make a living and continue to prosper, is something I would advise people to think about. You want to go out to dinner? Great. You want to celebrate and scream? Great. Go back to work. So that's how I would handle highs and lows.
Very wise, Norman. Those are really, really helpful and help people stay a little more consistent through their day. Never get too high and never get too low, because the next day is coming, right? And you got to keep closing that business. So,
well, in closing,
there
was one other thing, if I may.
Please.
If there is an organization, small, medium-sized, or large, out there who sees this video and they're considering talking with me, I would encourage them to have that conversation so we get to know one another, so that I can understand what's on your mind, Mr. Client. Maybe I can help you. We don't know until we speak. So let's at least speak and figure it out together. And I'll tell you if I can't help you. You know, I won't just say, okay, I can do it because I can make a profit doing it. It's got to work for both of us. You know, I have 15 to 20 letters of reference from candidates, clients, and people who've known me over 30 years that I can submit to a potential client to enhance their comfort zone, that regarding what other people have to say about me. So it's okay for us to talk once or twice and evaluate together whether we should partner with one another, as opposed to just making that decision exclusively based on this video.
Right. Yes. Always good to have that personal touch and just have a chat. It's not a commitment. It's just a chat. So good stuff. Norman Weitzberg, Pinnacle Executive Search. Really, really appreciate your time and you taking the time to tell your story a little bit. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. I hope I answered your questions in a satisfactory way.
You did, Norman. All right. All the best.
Okay, Matt. Thank you.
You bet.